In Arrow Village, a father heard a humming coming from the ground. He tried to ignore it until his daughter's footsteps started being followed by footprints that were not hers, and the voice said only one thing: bring it back. Hello, lovelies. Welcome back to African Folktales by Nia. Today's story is about a secret buried in the soil and a promise the forest never forgot. Trust me, you will want to stay until the very end. Baba Sani loved his daughter Kemi more than anything in Arrow Village, and everyone knew it because he treated her like a tiny flame that must never go out. Arrow was a quiet place with red soil, small huts, and long farm paths that smelled like wet leaves after rain. In the evenings, women cooked over fire, children chased one another, and elders told stories about the forest, not to scare people, but to remind them that the world had rules older than any person. Kemi was 9 and full of questions, and Baba Sani often laughed at her curiosity, but he became serious when she asked about the deep forest, because his heart carried a secret he never wanted to place on a child. One Harmattan night, when the air was dry and the moon looked pale, Baba Sani sat outside by a small fire and listened to the night, expecting the usual sounds of insects and faraway dogs, until he heard a low humming that did not belong anywhere. It was soft, steady, and patient, like a song with no words. And the strangest part was that it did not seem to come from the trees or the sky. It seemed to rise from under his own feet, as if the earth had a mouth and was calling him quietly. Baba Sani stood up and walked around his yard, checking the path and the bushes, but no one was there. The humming continued anyway, so he bent down and placed his palm on the earth, and a cold feeling traveled into his skin, not like cold air, but like fear that knows your name. He pulled his hand back fast and looked at the hut where Kemi slept, because danger can be handled by an adult, but it becomes too much when it might touch a child. He tried to sleep, but the humming kept returning in his mind, even when it faded, and by morning his eyes were heavy and his thoughts were loud. He went to see Mama Ef, the oldest woman in Arrow, because elders like her did not guess when they spoke, they remembered. Mama Ef listened with calm eyes and asked him one simple question that made his throat go dry. What did you take long ago and hide from the land? Baba Sani wanted to deny it, but his silence answered for him. And Mama F pointed to Kemi's red and white bracelet and said, "Bright spirits attract hungry shadows, and hungry shadows do not knock with their hands, they knock with sound." Baba Sani felt his heart squeeze, because he understood the humming was not random, it was a call. And calls like that do not come without a reason. Baba Sani made his decision before the next sunset, even though it felt like he was tearing his own chest open. He told Kemi she would stay with Auntie Zaina in Koro Town for a while, and Kemi's face folded in confusion, because children can feel when adults are hiding fear behind calm words. She asked if she had done something wrong, and Baba Sani held her cheeks gently and told her no, but his voice shook, and that shook Kemi more than the trip itself. Before sunrise, they left Arrow, carrying a small bag with dried fish and groundnuts, and Baba Sani held Kemi's hand tightly as they walked the long road. The bushes on both sides looked normal, yet Baba Sani kept glancing at them as if they had eyes, because fear can make even quiet leaves look like listeners. Kemi tried to talk on the road, asking questions the way she always did, but Baba Sani answered with short replies, because the more he spoke, the more he feared the humming would learn his voice and remember it. After some time, Baba Sani looked back at their footprints on the dusty path, and his stomach turned, because beside their footprints was another set, small and neat, appearing step by step, as if an invisible child walked close behind them. Baba Sani stopped, and Kemi turned and asked why, and Baba Sani forced a smile and said he was only checking the road. He scanned the bushes, the trees, the open path, but there was nobody there. Still, the small footprints stayed for a moment, then softened as the wind brushed the dust, like the earth itself was hiding the proof.
Babasani kept walking, pretending nothing happened, but inside he knew something had followed them, not with a body, but with a presence. When they reached Koro Town, the place felt louder, brighter, and busier than Aro, filled with market shouts, pots clanging, and children running between stalls. Auntie Zaina welcomed Kemi warmly, cooked sweet porridge, braided her hair, and tried to make her laugh. Babasani spoke privately with Zaina, telling her to watch Kemi closely, especially at night. Auntie Zaina tried to joke that Babasani worried too much, until she looked into his eyes and saw this was not normal father worry. Babasani hugged Kemi and promised he would return soon, but Kemi held his shirt and begged him not to go because she could feel something unseen had followed her. Babasani left anyway because his fear told him Kemi was safer far from his hut. And yet, as he walked away, he felt the same cold humming pass through his mind like a shadow crossing a doorway, and he realized that distance alone might not be enough. That first night in Koro Town, Kemi tried to sleep, but sleep did not feel like rest. She lay on her mat and listened to normal sounds, distant laughter, dogs barking, the wind brushing leaves, and she told herself she was safe because Auntie Zaina was near. But the sadness of missing her father sat in her chest like a stone. When she closed her eyes, she dreamed of a calabash sitting on a mat carved with tiny patterns that looked like eyes, and the calabash hummed slowly, the same low humming Babasani had heard. In the dream, Kemi felt pulled toward it, like a string was tied between her heart and the calabash, and when she tried to step away, her feet felt stuck, as if the mat had turned into mud. She woke up sweating and tried to brush it off as a bad dream until she heard the humming again, faint but real, as if it had followed her out of the dream and into the room. Kemi sat up quickly, her eyes wide, and called Auntie Zaina. Auntie Zaina rushed in and listened, but she heard nothing, so she touched Kemi's forehead and said, "Maybe it was just fear and homesickness." Kemi wanted to believe her aunt, so she lay back down, but the humming stayed close to her thoughts, like a quiet visitor that refused to leave. Over the next days, Kemi noticed strange things that made her feel like she was walking with a secret behind her. In the market, people would suddenly pause and stare behind her as if they heard a voice. Then they would shake their heads and continue. Children would stop playing and run away without saying why. Even a woman pounding yam would freeze for a second, listening to something Kemi could not see, then continue with shaky hands. One afternoon, Kemi went to River Luma to fetch water, and the riverbank was too quiet, like the world was holding its breath. When she looked into the water, her reflection flickered, appearing and disappearing, as if the river could not decide if she belonged. The humming rose again, and this time it seemed to come from the water itself. Kemi stood up fast and saw small footprints forming in the sand behind her, one after another, like an invisible child walked near her. She did not run because she did not want people to laugh at her, but her legs shook as she walked. Home. When Auntie Zaina saw Kemi's face, she finally stopped treating it like imagination. And when she examined Kemi's red and white bracelet, she noticed a tiny knot in it that had not been there before, a knot too neat to be random. Auntie Zaina's mouth went dry, because her own mother had taught her that some knots are not tied by hands, they are tied by promises. That night, Auntie Zaina took Kemi to Uncle Deo, a gentle herbal man in Koro Town who helped people with problems that did not fit inside simple words. Uncle Deo listened patiently, as if he could hear the fear behind Kemi's story, and he did not laugh or brush her off, which made Kemi feel a little safer. He rang a small bell once, and the air in the room felt heavier, like something unseen had stepped closer to listen. Uncle Deo stared at a corner and spoke toward it, not harshly but firmly, asking why it followed the child. For a moment there was silence, and then the humming answered, spreading softly through the room like breath. Kemi held Auntie Zena's hand tightly, and Uncle Deo drew a thin circle of chalk on the floor and asked Kemi to stand inside it. Then the humming shifted into a whisper that formed words slowly, and Kemi heard it clearly enough to understand because it said, "Bring it back." Kemi's mouth went dry, and she asked what it was, and the whisper stopped as if it was listening to her voice and learning her sound. Uncle Deo quickly warned Kemi not to speak to it again, because some things grow stronger when they are answered. Auntie Zena asked what was happening, and Uncle Deo explained in simple words that a wrong done long ago can attach itself to the blood of the one who did it. And even if the child is innocent, the child can become the path the debt uses to return. Kemi insisted she had taken nothing, and Uncle Deo agreed that Kemi did not steal, but he also said the shadow did not care about fairness, it cared about balance. He asked about Kemi's father, and when Auntie Zena mentioned Baba Sani's worry and fear, Uncle Deo nodded, as if the shape of the story became clearer. He said the safest thing was not to hide or run, because hiding makes some shadows hungrier, and running makes them enjoy the chase. He said they needed to return to Aro village, not to fight the shadow, but to face the truth that created it. That same night, Kemi dreamed again, but this time the dream was not only about the calabash. She saw Baba Sani sitting alone by a small fire in Aro, his shoulders heavy, and behind him a tall, thin shadow moved like a palm tree in the wind. She tried to shout, but no sound came out. Then she saw a girl on the path between Aro and Koro, a girl who looked like Kemi, but whose eyes were darker. And the girl smiled like she had been waiting for Kemi for a very long time. Kemi woke up crying, and Auntie Zena held her. And in that moment, Kemi knew she had to go home, not because she wanted to, but because something in her heart was pulling her back, like a rope tied to her life. The journey back to Aro felt heavier than the journey away, because now Kemi understood that something unseen was part of her story. Uncle Deo walked with them, carrying herbs and his staff, and he warned Kemi not to answer any voice she heard on the road, even if it sounded like someone she loved, because some shadows borrow familiar sounds the way a person borrows clothes. As they walked, a voice that sounded exactly like Baba Sani called Kemi's name softly from the trees, and Kemi's heart jumped. But Uncle Deo struck his staff on the ground, and the voice changed, becoming thin and cold, like dry leaves rubbing together. Kemi's skin prickled because she realized the voice was a trick. When they reached Aro, the village did not feel normal. People stood in small groups speaking quietly, and even the goats were strangely still. Mama F stood near the path watching, and when she saw Kemi, she nodded as if she expected her return. Kemi felt chills when Mama F glanced behind her for a second, like she was greeting something Kemi could not see. Baba Sani ran out and hugged Kemi tightly, his arms trembling, and for a moment, Kemi wanted to forget everything and just stay in that hug. But the humming rose faintly under the ground, reminding her that the story was not finished. Inside Baba Sani's hut, Uncle Deo asked Baba Sani to speak the truth, and Baba Sani's face tightened as if he was swallowing stones. He confessed that when he was young, he and his friend Sola went into the deep forest to hunt, ignoring elders' warnings, and they found a small shrine beneath a twisted tree. There was a carved calabash there, beautiful and shining, and Sola wanted it. Baba Sani said he told Sola no, but they were foolish and they took it anyway, thinking it was only an object. After that, Sola fell sick, began speaking strangely in his sleep, then vanished without footprints, and Baba Sani became afraid and ashamed. Instead of returning the calabash, he buried it near his old farm, hoping silence would fix it. Mama F's eyes showed no surprise, only sadness, and she said, "The land does not forget just because a man closes his eyes." That night, the village gathered with lanterns, praying softly, and fear moved through the crowd like smoke. Then a tied goat suddenly cried out in a thin voice that was not its own and whispered, "Bring it back."
and people screamed and dropped lanterns. Mama EF raised her hand and ordered calm, because panic feeds the unseen. She said they would go to the old farm at dawn, dig up what was hidden, and return it properly, because secrets buried in the soil do not rot, they wait. At dawn they walked to the old farm. Men carried hoes and shovels, women carried water and cola nuts and palm oil, because in Arrow Village, even when people were afraid, they still respected old ways. Baba Sani led them to a spot near a broken stump and began to dig. The soil smelled old, like it had been asleep for years. Kemi stood close, holding her bracelet as if it could protect her, and Uncle Deo watched carefully, ready to stop anyone who acted foolishly. When Baba Sani's shovel struck something hard, the sound was sharp, and the whole crowd went silent, as if everyone stopped breathing together. Baba Sani cleared the soil with trembling hands until the calabash appeared, still smooth, still shining in that dirt as if it had been waiting for light. The humming rose louder right away, and Kemi's bracelet grew hot and tight, like it was waking too. Uncle Deo warned no one to touch the calabash with bare hands, but the calabash moved slightly on its own, like a baby turning in sleep, and people stepped back in fear. Then, in a voice that sounded like a child and an old person at the same time, it said, "Finally." Kemi's mouth went dry, but she found the courage to ask what it wanted, and the calabash hummed once and said, "The one who promised." Baba Sani's face turned pale because a memory rose in him like a snake waking, and he whispered that long ago, when fear crushed his chest, he begged the forest to spare him and promised to return balance. Mama EF asked what words he used, and Baba Sani confessed. He said, "Take my future shame, but spare me now." The calabash hummed as if pleased and said, "Your future came." Kemi felt dizzy, as if the ground pulled at her heart. Images that were not hers flashed in her mind. 2 boys in the forest, a twisted tree, a shrine, a rushed burial. Then she saw the girl again, the one from her dreams, standing behind the calabash, with dark eyes and a small smile. People could not see her, but Kemi could, and the girl whispered, "You are the future he promised." Kemi tried to step back, but her bracelet tightened like a hand closing, and she
realized the calabash was not just calling Baba Sani, it was calling the debt hidden inside the family. Uncle Deo wrapped the calabash in cloth and palm leaves, and they walked toward the forest, because he said the beginning of the promise must meet its ending where it was made. Mama Effitz insisted only a few should go, because too many people would bring too much fear into the forest, and fear makes wrong choices spread fast. So Baba Sani, Kemi, and Uncle Deo entered the trees while the village waited behind with quiet prayers. Inside the forest, the air felt colder, and the light became weak, and Kemi's bracelet pulled gently as if it knew the way. The deeper they went, the quieter everything became, until even the birds seemed far away. When they reached the twisted tree, its branches curved like arms frozen in warning, and the bark looked older than time. Baba Sani placed the wrapped calabash on the ground and whispered an apology, and Uncle Deo began a calm prayer, asking the land for peace. But before he finished, the bark creaked and opened like a mouth, revealing darkness that looked like it had eyes. A thin voice came from inside, and it sounded like a child who had learned to speak through pain. "You brought it back," the voice said. "Good." Baba Sani begged the forest to take him instead of his child, but the voice answered, "The promise was not for you alone." Then Kemi saw the girl step out of the darkness, clear as day to her eyes, though she felt like cold wind. The girl looked exactly like Kemi, same face, same height, but her eyes were darker and older, like they held a long wait. "I waited," the girl said softly. "I waited while you grew, while you laughed, while he tried to sleep." Babasani shook because he recognized her without understanding how. Kemi stepped forward slowly because something deep in her heart felt the girl's loneliness like a shared wound. Uncle Deo warned her to stay back, but Kemi whispered that the girl was not only a threat, she was also a hurt. The girl asked Kemi if she knew what it felt like to watch life from the edge without touching it, and Kemi's eyes filled with tears because she did not fully know, but she could feel it in the girl's voice. When the girl touched Kemi's hand, Kemi felt a rush of memories. Nights under roots, rain on leaves, the sound of laughter from far away, hunger for warmth. Kemi pulled back, trembling, and asked the girl her name. The girl said she had none because promises do not get names. Kemi's heart broke at that, and she said, "Then I will give you one. Your name is Lami." The forest went
still, as if it heard something important. The girl repeated it softly. Lami, like tasting hope for the first time. For a moment, the air softened, but then a deeper voice rose from inside the tree, heavy and ancient, and Uncle Deo's face tightened because he knew this voice was not the girl's. "Names," the deep voice said, "changed nothing," and the ground trembled, and thin cracks spread across the forest floor like lines on dry clay. Lami's eyes widened with fear, and she whispered to Kemi, "That is the keeper." Uncle Deo asked, "Keeper of what?" And Lami replied, "Keeper of debts." Two glowing eyes appeared in the darkness, slow and steady, watching them like a judge. The keeper spoke with weight, saying, "Balance is not a toy. A promise made to save a life must return a life." Babasani cried out, begging the keeper to take him because he made the promise. But the keeper answered, "The promise was for the future, and the future stands before me." Kemi felt her heart pound and her bracelet tighten, and she realized the keeper saw her as the future Babasani offered in fear. Uncle Deo spoke bravely, saying the calabash had been returned and the truth confessed, and asking what more the forest wanted. The keeper answered, "Not death." Everyone froze because they expected death. Babasani asked what it wanted then, and the keeper said, "Memory." The word sounded simple, but it landed like a stone. The keeper said Babasani buried the calabash, buried guilt, buried truth, and tried to sleep, and now he would not die because death would be too easy, but he would carry the full weight of what he buried out in the open with the village knowing. Babasani trembled because he feared shame more than pain, and the keeper said, "You asked for your future shame to be taken. It was delayed, not erased. Now you will live with it." The cracks in the ground slowed, as if the forest approved of truth. Then the keeper turned its attention to Lami and said gently that she was formed from broken balance and she was never meant to stay trapped forever. Kemi begged for Lami, saying she had a name now, and the keeper replied that a name gives shape and place, but it also said Lami could not remain divided, and there must be one life, one body, one memory. Kemi understood the choice behind those words, and her chest felt tight, because it meant Lami could either go back alone into darkness or join Kemi in a way that could never be undone. Lami looked at Kemi with fear and hope mixed together, and she asked if joining would make her disappear. Kemi shook her head, and Rabak said Lami would not disappear. She would become part of Kemi, part of her heart and breath, and she would finally feel sun and laughter and love instead of endless waiting. Lami asked questions like a child, asking if food truly exists in a place she has never tasted, asking if she would feel warmth, if she would feel safety, if she would feel family. And Kemi answered yes each time, crying because she meant it.
Uncle Deo warned that such a joining must be chosen freely, and the keeper said there would be no undoing once it happened. But Kemi said she did not want undoing. She wanted peace, and she stepped forward without running. Lami pressed her forehead to Kemi's, and warmth moved between them like sunrise, and Kemi felt Lami's sadness flow through her, not to hurt her, but to finally be held. Lami's body faded gently, not like smoke, but like water sinking into soil, and as she faded, she whispered, "Thank you for giving me a name." The twisted tree closed its bark slowly, the glowing eyes dimmed, and the cracks in the ground sealed as if the forest was breathing out. Birds began to sing again, and the air felt lighter, and Babasani rushed to Kemi, shaking, asking if she was still herself, and Kemi opened her eyes and said she was still Kemi, only fuller, as if her heart had grown into new space. They returned to Aro village with Uncle Deo, and Babasani gathered everyone and told the truth without hiding, speaking about the shrine, the theft, the promise, and the delay. And though some villagers felt anger and others felt shame, Mama F said truth restores balance, and silence feeds shadows more than darkness does. From that day, Babasani lived with humility instead of hiding, and the calabash was returned properly to the shrine with respect, and no child was ever promised to the forest again. Kemi sometimes stood near the forest's edge and felt a quiet warmth in her chest where Lami's memory rested, and it no longer felt like fear. It felt like a soft light that reminded her that loneliness can be healed when someone is brave enough to see it, name it, and welcome it home. The lesson is this: what you hide does not disappear, it waits. And the debts we create in fear do not always return to us. Sometimes they look for the innocent, but truth spoken early can save a future. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support truly means a lot. And tell me in the comments, if you were Kemi, would you accept Lami or run?